Hey Scott, have you ever been on like any of the dating app stuff? You ever done any of that stuff before?
No, but I was on Romper Room when I was a child. Is that like dating apps?
Look that up in Google, guys. Romper Room it is.
Do not look it up, because I grabbed the mic. I was 5 years old. I grabbed the mic from the host and I said, "My name is Scott Cohen. How are you?"
Oh yes, that's not. I guess maybe yeah. Some dating apps could be a version of Romper Room. Definitely a much more adult version of Romper Room.
I see Scott and I see Chris.
They're my friends. I love them.
Well, it was a female that was leading Romper Room, so it is. All the little boys were like,
Just wanting to connect. That's all we want to do, right? All we want to do is connect. So more on that right in here on We Got Balls.
Welcome to We Got Balls, real, raw, masculine sex talk with Chris Inman and Scott Cohn. Here we go.
All right, guys, we're back here on We Got Balls, and our conversation today is around the struggle to connect. And if you've ever logged on to a dating app or tried to go dating and was like, man, there is nothing out here. In fact, there was a guy who commented on one of our episodes a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the struggle to connect, the struggle to date, and just the dating crisis that we find ourselves in. And, we'll just be honest. You and I are old married dudes, and we've been married for a long time. But I've got young kids. You've got kids. And I see it. I see it in my own kids, the struggle to be able to truly connect with someone romantically. And, it's not like it used to be where we could go to the pool or go to the mall or, go to a friend's house and there would be a whole plethora of people just to go out with. Now you got to get on your phone. You got to do this thing. You got to swipe. Have you seen those guys who just have the automatic right swipers? They just swipe right on everybody just because.
That's what they do.
Heard of this?
No,
that's what they do. They have like a machine that like basically the fake finger that swipe. And that way, there you go. Wow. I'm always getting my options. Never know who will connect with me.
It's funny because I was reading an article earlier this week about kind of, and it was written by a progressive dude, and he was talking about the war that's going on, civil war within progressivism, where you've got a part of the progressive movement that is trying to promote the freedom of sex workers to have sex with whoever they want to, whenever they want. And that's normalized. That's good. We want to de-shame that, right? That's what they're trying to do. And at the same time, there's this movement within pornography or within mainstream movies where actresses and actors who don't want to participate in sex scenes should have the right to not be able to participate in sex scenes if they want to. But and you have both positions advocated, they're kind of a conflict. It's okay if you have actual sex with a person, but if you have simulated sex, you should be able to refuse, right? That's shameful now. That's shameful. So it's just like going up to a female on the street and trying to have a conversation is seen as aggressive behavior now, right?
So now you're getting to it. Now I see what you're saying. You're saying just going and having an honest conversation and telling someone, I like you, you're attractive, you're hot, and maybe throwing some pickup lines in there.
Hey, could I get your phone number? It's like, are you accosting me?
Yeah. Right. I have a boyfriend, Scott. I have a boyfriend.
So I just think the rules are really crazy and confusing probably right now I'm glad I'm not in that space. It has to be hard. Really difficult.
It's hard. For sure. Very, very, very hard. And I think when we look back at human history and look back at our experiences, there have always been places where it's been hard to connect. I think for us, maybe in our generation, connection maybe might have been easier romantically, but more difficult to find really good, true friends. I mean, I can't count on one hand the number of friends that I still have from high school and college. I just don't have any guys that I was really, and these were people that I thought, man, we were going to hang together forever. We were going to be together for the rest of our lives. And I've reached back out to a few of them and tried to connect, and there's just not that depth of relationship. It's kind of like the relationship that we had was purely circumstantial, which ironically sounds a lot like the hookup culture. You just have, or what is it called now? Situationships, where you date. Are you too old for situationships, Scott?
I guess now I'm learning new language. My world is expanding
it's
because
like
my language
it's
is increasing.
it's like somewhere between friends with benefits and a relationship.
What is
It's like
what's a booty call then?
that's a friend with benefits. Basically, that's a one night stand. A situationship is we are in a relationship, but we're not exclusive, and we're having sex or we're hooking up or whatever it is.
Oh, it's okay. And then you've got the polycule, right? The polycule, or however they print.
I don't even know what you're talking about now.
A polycule is a polyamorous group of people that have sex with each other.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Yes, and that is a thing now. So, right.
Oh my God.
This is why it's so confusing, because like it changes like the weather. So
yeah, you're
it's
right.
almost like you need an online glossary that's updated hourly to keep track of what are the new rules, what are the new things that we're calling this now. I mean, oh my gosh.
And it's all in this. I want to be with someone, and you know the I think in our culture the thing that is determined as the quickest way to connect is to have sex. So if I'm sexual with somebody, it's almost like I had a friend of mine who was a little bit younger than me, and we were talking, and he has a completely different background than me, and he sees sex as just an exchange of services. And he's like, I see sex as helping someone move. It's the same thing. So, you know, if you need a blowjob, I'm here to give you a blowjob. I'll be your buddy, and I'll pat your penis on the head and give it a little suck, and that's it. And I'm not trying to be, titillating to anybody, but the casualness with which we find ourselves in the connection world, and I'm using air quotes for the podcast crew, is just, it's been all backwards. In fact, maybe for this episode, I think it might be helpful to bring in a paradigm of connection that I learned many years ago from a therapist named KK Ray. She's a therapist up in Nashville, Tennessee, Franklin, Tennessee, specifically. And what she's talking about, she was speaking to a group of church leaders, and she was talking about the 4 different types of connections. There's social connection, there's emotional connection, there's spiritual connection, and there's physical connection, in that order. So like when the way it's intended to connect, I meet somebody, like we meet and we start talking and we find the things that we have in common, and we find out, hey, you know, this person, this is a cool person. I like hanging out with them. We laugh together. It's pretty neat, right? And I think that's kind of one of the things that's vibe with us, is we have a lot of things in common. You know, we have a lot of the same interests, but I think what happens a lot of times is we shortcut that. Maybe, you know, I see you socially and I like you, and we skip over the emotional and the spiritual, which we'll get to in a second, and we go straight to the physical, which is a hookup. That's all it is a hookup. And we got to see if I'm sexually compatible, if I'm physically compatible with somebody before I can connect with them in real life.
Well, could we expand this beyond like just romantic relationships, like as a context for connection? Because the longest longitudinal study that's ever been done on male health and wellness was done starting in the 1920s in Harvard. And they followed a group of entering college freshman males from all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds. They recruited guys from the inner city as well for this too. And they followed them for, it's been going on. It's still going on. The research project, it's been going on for over 90 years now.
Wow.
And they were able to isolate kind of the factors that contribute to a happy life, right? Okay. So happy life defined as good, really good mental health outcomes and really good physical health outcomes, longevity, not dealing with a lot of health problems, so on and so forth. So here's the amazing thing. It all boiled down to connection. Having.
Well, what is that? What do you mean? What do you mean by connection, though, Scott?
So they defined it as not even being happily married, but it was having a genuine friendship. So the thing that made the males in this study have the greatest health and wellness outcomes, physical and emotional and mental, was having a good friendship.
Now, was it friendship with a significant other, or was it friendship with
it was a male man? It was a friendship with another man.
Oh, interesting.
It was male friendship. So because a lot of these guys, you can imagine over the course of 90 years, many of them got divorced.
Yeah.
So the marriage relationship was not seen as kind of the overriding factor that led to happiness and wellness. It was just kind of connections in general. But when you start boiling it down to, it was in-depth, meaningful friendships. And so if you kind of look at what you just talked about, I was listening to an Allender Center podcast a couple of weeks ago on friendship, and they were talking about these three factors that I think are really true. Is one is, do you have kind of a shared vision for life? What makes a good friendship, or what makes a good partnership of any kind? You have a shared vision for life.
Common values. Yeah. You
Right.
have the same things that
So you and I have we have a common value structure. We have a common worldview. Do you have meaningful conversations? We have some of the most meaningful conversations of any conversations I've ever had with people. And then the third one is, do you have an increasing ability as your relationship grows to hold desire and disappointment? Because both things happen in meaningful relationships. There are things that I desire from you and that you desire from me, and there will be disappointments in those desires not being met along the way. And how do you handle those ruptures and repairs in the relationship? Those kind of three overriding factors that go beyond kind of the surface, how you doing today? I'm fine, you're fine, we're all fine, let's just be fine. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, that's, those kind of relationships are the relationships that frankly, I just don't place any value on. Like if I only get, I'm doing good, how are you doing? And we talk about sports and politics and the weather, I'm moving on, because my life's too short for that's not a connection for me. Like I don't find any, and I guess we can get down to, when you're talking about those three descriptions of, is that emotional intimacy that we're talking about? That when you have a true connection, you relate on some level of emotional, some level of emotional presence?
I would say, but I would also say too, for men, I think the physical dimension of friendship is really important. Like, I think it's important to do things physically with your body with other guys. Play becomes an important part of that. Like, can we play together? Can we go out and, go hiking? Can we go whitewater rafting? Can we do an obstacle, whatever? Can we go work out together? Is there some kind of thing that we do with our bodies that connects us to one another? And so I think the reason I wanted to expand the definition to friendship is because I think physical connection between men is really nurturing, is really important. It's an important part of friendship and care, but also play. And you've got to have those, but you also have to have that in a sexual relationship, right? Because care and playfulness also are part of what makes sex good. Sex is a form of play.
So we're getting awful dirty. You just told me, I think is what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a physical intimacy that's necessary in every relationship. In a platonic, let's call it a non I don't even want to call it non-sexual, because I think actually there's a sexuality in affection, even though it's not genitalic. Like you're not using your genitals to like, I don't tell you I love you with my genitals. Never have, never will. Yes. Not happening.
Thank you.
So you're welcome.
I appreciate that.
That's not in my wheelhouse.
I do not want your genitals in my ears.
That's right. And but there's this idea that, I'm going to give you a hug, I'm going to put my hand on your shoulder.
Yes.
I'm going to touch you in ways that are appropriate and safe. And so even in a friendship, even in a non
same-sex relationship,
that's the word I'm looking for, a non-romantic relationship. So that's the connection that we're saying builds happiness in life, is non-romantic connections. Yes. Romantic connections can be also very good. But the reality is, Scott, and I think it's important to say this, especially since a large majority of our listenership, it was raised in the church, you do not have to be married.
And your wife is not your best friend.
That's right.
She can be a dear, close, loving friendship, but she's a wife. That's a totally different category of relationship.
Exactly. Which comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of expectations, a lot of agendas, which it should, because she wants to make sure that you're going to do what you say you're going to do and take care of things and provide and all the responsibilities of a partner.
But so do meaningful friendships, right?
Well, but see, I think it's important in non-romantic connections, Scott, there is an element which I can leave you and we're okay. Like whenever we hang up a phone call, I don't think to myself, I wonder what Scott's doing this afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't think about that. Now, when I hang up the phone with my wife, I think about that. I think about what's going on with my kids. If there are people that are working for me or I'm working for somebody else, I think about, and so I think when we talk about connection, it's really, we need to put a caveat. We need to put an asterisk on those types of relationships. I call them agendaed relationships because they want something from me versus my true friendships, like you're talking about, which I can be with them and I can leave them, but they're completely safe because they don't expect anything from me.
Now, I'm going to throw a wrench in that because I think a lot of that depends on your attachment style and whether you if you feel secure in a relationship with another male or versus a female. Like, so if you have insecure attachment, you may be completely fine not thinking about your spouse because you're insecurely attached and you're avoiding with her, but you may be very anxious about your relationship with your male friends, right?
All right. Fair enough. You got me.
It's
me.
possible.
I can't argue with
it's
that.
possible.
Yeah,
So you have to be kind of curious about if you start to feel that anxiety, like, why am I feeling anxious about what Chris is thinking about me? And because there's usually a story there. There's something about my relationships 100%. With other guys that kind of gets very tenuous and very tricky, and I feel like I'm going to be rejected. So that's a possibility, right?
Yeah, it's there. And it can happen. And I think when we're talking about the difficulty of connection, that kind of stuff just, is a fly in the soup because it's not operating. And I'm going to use a word that I don't like to use, but for this purposes, it'll fit the way that it should. I should feel more attached to my partner than I do to my friends. But right now I feel really alienated or really nervous about my romantic relationship and really bonded and attached to my best friends who I think just get me and I just want somebody. And I think therein lies our bottom line conversation. Do we need to connect? Is it a need? Is it something that's hardwired in us that if we don't connect, there will be a massive level of dysfunction in our lives?
And the answer is absolutely yes.
Why? Because I'm fine, Scott. I'm fine. How many guys have you heard say that? I'm fine. I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
Yeah, and that is the cultural masculine expectation, right? There's this mythology around masculinity in the United States or the Western world that the guy is the independent. He's able to engage the world on his own, by himself, with his own skills and own abilities, and he doesn't need anybody. I am an island, right? I'm a rock. And unfortunately, that's not how neurobiology works. Right?
Are you saying that we come into this world with a desire for someone to see us and connect with us?
I'm saying the human mind is a product not just of what you're experiencing in your body, not what just is going on in your brain, but it's what's going on between us, that our minds emerge and we're constantly growing and developing and changing. I'm not the same guy that you knew 2 years ago, that you met 2 years ago. You're not the same guy. We're different guys. And in relationship, you ought to expect that if you're growing as people, you're growing in your relationship and there's new dimensions to be discovered, whether it's a friendship or a romantic partnership. That's what keeps the relationship interesting. And so, but it's that emergent property of the human mind. The human mind can be defined as what goes on in your body, what goes on in your brain, and what goes on between my brain and your brain.
Yes.
That's where my mind forms. And so there's a sense in which it's necessary for us to have other brains, other minds involved in our lives for us to function well. So
can we take it up a notch?
Yeah.
It is essential. It is the way that we learn as human beings. You were talking about attachment style. How does someone have an insecure attachment style, Scott?
Because they learned in their family and their relationship with their mother and father through millions of interactions in their first 4 years of life that they could either depend on these caretakers to be there for them when they cried and when they needed something and when their emotions were dysregulated, or they learn to not depend on that in one way or another, to either just, well, it's all we've talked about. Babies that are given up for adoption as babies that don't get a lot of care and attention, they don't cry. They're not sitting there in the cribs crying. Why?
Right.
They know nobody's coming for them.
Yeah.
And so we learn early in our lives, when I cry, when I express emotion, is somebody going to be there for me to soothe me or to stimulate me, to pick me up when I'm down, to help me come down when I'm feeling angry or afraid. And when I don't get that consistently, which the psychologists define as good enough parenting is 30% of the time, when I don't get that kind of care at least 30% of the time, it's going to damage my ability to trust in you that I can be safe with you, right? In some sense.
So there's an inadequate, less than 30% connection person to person in my developmental years, and birth to 4. And I think it probably can be amplified if it carries on beyond that as well. Not that it's fixed at 4, but it definitely is formed before 4. And so we have this experience in our bodies, in our minds, that I have to survive another way.
Now, go back to your 4 circles of what was it? The 4 circles of connection.
It was social, emotional, spiritual, and physical. In that order. And that again, that's romantic. You can take the physical and move it towards the front if you're talking about non-romantic.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. Is I think developmentally it's the exact opposite. It starts with the physical.
Sure.
We come into this world, and the first thing that we experience is we're held, we're touched.
Sure. Absolutely.
We hear, right? We have a physical experience with the caregivers. We're sucking on a breast. We're being held against our father's chest. It's very sensory oriented. Then it goes into building. So from the physical, it goes to the emotional.
Yep.
And then it would go to the, what's the next one?
So, social, and then it would go to the spiritual.
So
spiritual is really talking about purpose and value and big picture intimacy.
So I think developmentally that's correct. Then that's the last part that gets developed, right? Because you don't get to the intellectual capability to understand purpose, meaning, value until those other 3 layers have kind of developed.
Yes.
But the social comes out of the emotional, and the emotional comes out of the physical. So it's an embodied.
Developmentally, exactly right.
So notice that developmentally, how embodied our experience of connection is.
100%.
That never goes away.
Let's get to that. So if someone is struggling to connect, let's just go back to the dating apps. There's a guy, and he's listening to this, and he wants to find a girl to connect with. Now, first of all, dating apps are going to be really hard because there is no physical connection on a dating app. It is not there. It is literally just data on a screen. And you're struggling to get to a place where you can get in person and be human to human with another human being. But if that's the way you got to go with it, and I don't recommend it, but if that's the way you got to go with it, what can a guy do to cultivate his own security in his body, seeking to make a connection with someone else?
Using that method, I think it's a roll of the dice, to be honest with you. And the reason why is because it's a guy marketplace. The dating apps are a guy marketplace. There is one girl for every 10 guys.
Sure.
And
what makes a guy stand out? Now, you could be a piece of crap and just an absolute jerk that's ripped, and that might get some attention. But I think there is something in a man that is innately attractive, both in romantic and non-romantic relationships. And how do our guys cultivate that?
Well, if you're reading the same stuff that I've been reading on the cultural commentators on this particular issue, they talk about the 3 6s. So I'm 6 foot tall. Women are attracted to a guy that's 6 foot tall, got a 6-figure income, and a 6-inch penis. So right, the 3 6s. Yeah. So that's a fairly
Yeah, but that's not the answer to my question.
But
Because that's what the world, that's those fake guys, that's what they're looking for. I really do believe, and I could be totally wrong, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a way that men can come through. Now it's not going to be like salesy, like they get a win every single time, but over time they become this kind of man. They do this work, and they really can stand out as someone that is truly attractive.
In that environment, in the online environment,
or in the person-to-person environment.
I think that's my point is I don't think it can be done in the online environment, because the online environment is like going to the Cheesecake Factory. Have you ever been to the Cheesecake Factory to eat?
I do enjoy the Cheesecake Factory. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I do like flipping through the menu. It's like, I like to read the novel that is the Cheesecake Factory menu.
Right. It is too much choice. It's too much.
Yes.
And so that's what the online marketplaces for dating are like. It's tons of guys and very few women compared to the ratio of guys that are on there. And so the only way to stand out is if you fall into that criteria, you have a really great profile picture and you can kind of market and sell yourself with those statistics that the women in that marketplace are particularly looking for. I think the real opportunity is for guys to develop the skills to actually interact on an interpersonal basis in person in a live environment. So that's where the opportunity is.
How does one build those skills, Scott?
I think you have to, I think it's very difficult for young guys to do it because they're not the most self-reflective in the world at that point, right? For
Fair enough.
The younger the guy, the less self-reflection that he'll be capable of, because his brain is not fully matured as an adult brain until the first, the 30 years, first 30 years, until he gets to about 30 years old. So the capacity to be self-reflective and to think about yourself as a self, not really there with the younger guys. So I think it's very challenging. If you're going to do it, the way to do it is start engaging your story. Start understanding who you are and the things that have made you who you are. Start understanding what your attachment style is, right?
Yeah. Now we're opening the door. So I think the way that a guy can begin to build connections, whether it's romantic or not romantic, is exactly what you just said. Learn to be vulnerable. And that's a hard thing for a dude to do, especially for a young dude to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Because vulnerability is like, now I got to show the gap in my armor. Now you're going to stab me. Now you're going to, it can be very threatening to be vulnerable. But the thing that is really powerful about vulnerability, and again, I would say this, no matter the platform, maybe it's harder to see it in online, but I think when you really are confident in who you are, warts and all, when you've learned to be vulnerable with, and again, we've said this before, safe people, you can't just be vulnerable alone, because that's not going to take you anywhere. That's just going to lead you into insecurity. But if you're vulnerable with safe people who can speak into your life and speak goodness to you where you struggle to speak goodness to yourself, then you can begin to connect with others and yourself in a healthy way. You can begin to build relational maturity for yourself and with others as you build up a belief in who you really are. And the story work is part of that. Vulnerability with safe friends is part of that. But that is a cultivated dynamic within each human being.
Yeah. And let me give you an example of this. So this is fresh off the presses from yesterday. I was on a networking app from a group that I belong to for guys that have struggled with same-sex attraction. And a guy was posting for advice. And he said, listen, I have started to date girls, and I've met this one girl that I'm really attracted to, and I'm actually feeling kind of sexually aroused by her, and I'd really like to pursue her, but I'm afraid to reveal kind of my past history with her. And at the same time, I'm also scared of if I start engaging in kind of sexually, kind of intimate relations with her, that I'm not going to be able to perform and blah, 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 blah. And so what's your advice? And I said, well, this may be controversial advice, but my advice is that you be authentically who you are and not try to hide who you are.
Yes.
Because the minute you start to withhold information about your authentic self from her, you're creating a tension in your nervous system that's going to end up showing up in your arousal. Your ability to relax and get aroused and to enjoy sexual involvement is highly contingent on whether you feel like you're safe in the relationship or not. And if you don't feel like you can be your real self, if you can't be known in a relationship, you're holding that tension in your body, and it's going to affect your ability to get an erection or maintain an erection.
Yes.
And he's like, that's not the answer.
Well, but that's it, Scott. Authenticity is an emotional, mental, and relational muscle. It's got to be strengthened. And the only way, and dudes, authenticity is the sexiest thing on the face of the earth.
There is nothing more conducive to arousal than vulnerability that creates greater intimacy.
Because guess what? We want to be just like when we were babies. We want to see people being real with us and seeing us and letting them see us so we can feel like we're seeing them. And that interchange, that energy, that back and forth of authenticity and vulnerability and really, to some extent, love. I mean, that's what love is in a romantic and non-romantic sense, is that I can be with somebody and be held and cared for and be me and not have to perform at all.
And this is where a lot of young guys in particular get into trouble from the get-go in a relationship, because let's face it, our audience, but most young guys in general are struggling with pornography quite a bit, right? Yeah. And they've trained their arousal template and how they experience sexuality around being sexual with themselves in a very isolated environment, looking at content that they hope nobody finds out they're looking about.
Scott, hold the presses. Porn is not authentic? What are you saying? Are you saying that finding intimacy with my penis in my hand and someone having sex on a screen is not authentic?
I know that's crazy talk. I know that's crazy.
Oh my gosh. So we've trained ourselves all these years to be attached to inauthenticity.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only that, then when you go into a relationship, are you letting your partner know that? No. So
yeah. Now let's just say this very clearly. It's very clear. If you don't do the work with save people first, that is a minefield.
Yeah.
Running and having a date with somebody or having a first conversation with somebody and says, "Oh, by the way, I love to look at porn and masturbate." Not always the safest thing for you. It can lead to some shameful experiences.
That's not what I'm saying. But but I am saying if you're going to have a long-term intimate relationship with somebody, you can't hide a part of yourself.
No. Every
part's got to be welcome. And every part of your partner's got to be welcome. And that's why having conversations about your sexuality together, probably before you start having sex, is probably a really good strategy. Because you get to be known in that context. And frankly, I think most of us would choose being known and having great sex over not being known and struggling to have great sex, because I am bearing so much anxiety and shame in my body that sometimes I can't get it up, or I can't keep it up because those images intrude, or I think, what if they found out? Or there's all of that mixture of stuff in there, and it's not a great place to be. And I think we've all experienced that. So I think that's the first criteria, like to think about how do I really go about having a great relationship, is start with yourself. Start having a great relationship with yourself.
And I can only do that. Well, let me just speak for personally. I have only learned to do that when I'm with people who can be kind and safe with me.
I agree.
And curious.
I agree.
And one little caveat I just want to add. Some people would say, well, you can't have real relationships with people who you don't see in person. Now, I agree that seeing people in the flesh physically has a great benefit, as we've already discussed. There is a physicality that is truly beneficial, but it's not a requirement to build to connections. Case in point, how long before we met in person?
It was 2.5 years, wasn't it?
I think it was 3 years.
3 years.
I think it was 3 years. Actually, no, it was longer than that. It's 3.5 years.
Yeah. And we had a good relationship.
And we had a good relationship. Now, I would say this: if you can't see their face, that's really going to be hard, because you're probably talking to somebody that's doesn't look like what they think they look like, maybe, that can be part of the problem. But as long as you can see their face, and, whether that's on Zoom or FaceTime or whatever technology, and we met in a space where we were seeing each other's faces, and building that social and emotional intimacy together, it's possible. So there are a lot of benefits to technology. Yeah, dating apps suck in some senses, but in other ways, you can meet people that you never would have met before. I've got friends on multiple continents because of this technology.
Yeah.
I can connect in a brand new way that I would have never been able to connect with. I mean, I love my African and European and Australian brothers.
But the level, it was the intimacy, it was the vulnerability that led to the intimacy that created the relationship at a distance. That's very possible. And I do agree that the face, particularly the facial expressions, the gaze, that's really critical in building the relationship. So I think that's the first thing, is start with yourself. Have a good relationship with yourself. And most of us do not have good relationships with ourselves by default. We're insecure.
We need another set of eyes or multiple sets of eyes to begin to be kind to ourselves.
Yep. And so the second thing that I think is really critical, I think you could kind of boil it down to two things, is make sure you have a sense of purpose. Know where you're going. If you have a good relationship with yourself, then you can kind of work out, what is my purpose? What is my sense of meaning? Where do I derive a lot of meaning in my life? What are my values? And most young guys, again, have never done that work where they've stepped back and thought about, what do I value?
Most old guys don't do that work. What are you talking about?
Also true.
Most men never, because that's, as my friend Richard Rohr puts it, that's second half of life work. Purpose. Is second, and it takes a season, long season, maybe even decade or more, to know who I am. I mean, if you figure yourself out by the time you're 35 or 40, you're doing pretty good. Well, once you get to you can have, are you talking about life purpose or just general purpose?
I'm talking about life purpose, but see, my point is, you can start out as a young dude formulating a life purpose and make adjustments as you go. You're not going to end up where you thought you were going to be. Like, I never thought I'd be doing this. Did you? But
no, I did not.
But I didn't
even know this was going to be possible.
I didn't even know you could do this.
I know.
But I'm really glad I'm here. And
Me too.
And I see how everything that I did approach, I approached. Here was my intention when I graduated college. I got to feed my wife and children. And
when I graduated college, I wanted to move to Scotland and teach, and that didn't happen. So again, I think maybe less intimidatingly stated would be go on a journey. Yeah, because purpose feels like I have to have it figured out, versus I want to be committed to a journey. And dude, if you want to go on a journey by yourself, go have at it. But it's so much better to go on a journey with the people that you can walk with at that time. We're a part of an organization that uses this language, trustworthy traveling companions for this stretch of the road.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that language, because that says, listen, I want to connect. I want to know who I am. I want to be true to myself and authentic, but I also want to go somewhere with this.
And I got to tell you, this power of story is so important in figuring this piece of it out as well. So it not only helps you to engage your story to figure out who I am, but I think it helps you figure out where you're going. And where do I get this from? Well, just in general, if you go to the first book of the Bible, Genesis, right? Mm-hmm. When was that written? We think in general it was probably written by Moses, sometime in the wilderness, sometime after he brings.
I think it was dictated by Moses, and it was written down and passed down and officially transcribed about 600 BC. That's when it was like the final copy, the final edits were put
for sure. That's when it's all put together and put into a text format.
In a scroll, yeah.
But let's say Moses is writing this, so he's just rescued. He's been used by God to bring the people of Israel out of Egypt. What's he do? He writes a story. He writes their history.
And he writes a bunch of stories,
right? And it is a story. It's not just a history. It's like, hey, you need to understand where you're coming from if you want to understand where you're headed to.
Yep.
And I love looking at our lives that way because, again, this is work that you can do this work as a younger man, but typically there's no value seen in doing it unless you've got something really going on in your life right now that kind of forces you into that. And sexual struggles have a way of making us confront these realities, right? Because they make us stop down and go, what the hell is going on in my life? Right?
Why do I keep doing this shit? What's going on?
But one of the core things that we do, Chris, in our groups is we're helping guys engage their story, is to see your life as a epic story, right? Your life is far more exciting than Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or some grand sweeping epic story, because you're created by God, who created the universe, and he creates you, and he wants you to kind of co-author this story with him. He wants you to participate in this. And some people go, that's heresy. God is sovereign. He does whatever he wants. Hey, I got news for you. God created the animals and he brings them to Adam, and it says, the text says, and he wanted to see what he would call them. Like, Adam, you get to choose, name the animals.
What?
And
He lets us pick and choose. He gives us free will.
That's crazy. It's crazy, isn't it? And so
he loves our desires. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And so what if God was saying to you, what do you want your name to be? What do you want your story to be like? What do you want to be the big plot turns in this part of your story?
Yes. And that is the work of life. And I think that's what we're getting at. By the way, if you're questioning this, recovery is code for life. So we're trying to talk about recovery because we want to get back to what this is all about. And an essential part of our recovery and of our life is connection. And Scott, I'm so grateful to be connected with you. I'm so grateful to have the chance to connect with so many other people on this journey. And it's made my life so much richer and more beautiful, and given me the confidence to be me.
I agree, Chris. And I'm so glad to have you on this journey to help me kind of engage my story and figure out not only where I'm going, but where I've been that gets me to where I'm going.
Yeah. And then we get to sit back and toast and tell some jokes and play together and just be with one another, because that's the beauty of it. So be with us in just a week, actually. If you want to be with us on May the 24th at 11 a.m. on YouTube, we'll be going live, taking your questions and discussing various topics. I'd love for you to show up with us and be present and see our faces and connect. That's what's going to be going on. 11 Central, 12 Eastern, and 9 a.m. Pacific on Friday, May 24th.
And if you can't be with us live and in person while we're there, you can send us your questions in advance on YouTube or any of our other. You can email us at
balls 00 2 zeros, because we got 2 balls
at gmail.com.
And so we look forward to connecting with you guys very soon. Lots of opportunities. You can look that up at successfulmen.com of what's going to be coming down the pipe next. And we look forward to sharing life with you guys right here on We Got Balls.
And you do too.
Take care.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris and with Scott at successfulmen.com.